Very great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker. Doug Kim works at Microsoft, where he's been responsible for the words that we read when we go onto office.com to find out more about Office products. Doug came to Microsoft after a long career in journalism. Like many people here, like myself, technical communication is therefore a second career. But moving from journalism to TechCom, I said to Doug, that's perhaps a bit extreme because journalists have to tell the truth, whereas... But there are things that Doug did explain that between journalism and technical communication there is a lot in common. One of the main things is that both sets of professionals need to take time to explain complex ideas in a straightforward and easy to understand manner. And that's certainly what Doug's motivation has been in his work at Microsoft. So I'm very happy to ask Doug to take the podium and to tell us about No More Robot Speak at Microsoft. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. Wow, you're so polite here. Thank you. I have to say I was a little bit intimidated by the notion of coming all the way over to the UK to speak about our journey through voice. Voice is how we describe our journey for making the language for Microsoft more approachable and understandable for our everyday customers. So I did a little bit of studying to prepare for the trip, which meant that I watched a lot of Pride and Prejudice. See, in the United States, we have this channel that plays nothing but Pride and Prejudice all the time, 24 hours a day. They just play the film over and over and over again. And of course, we're Americans, though, so we only watch 3 minutes at a time, and because we have very short attention spans. But by the end of a month, we've seen the entire film. But I was studying to come here, so I actually watched 6 minutes. And it was that scene where Mr. Darcy is, you're all familiar with the story? Yeah, I'm just checking. Where Mr. Darcy is proposing to Miss Bennet for the first time. And he does it in this way that's he does it like this. He says, despite my better judgment and the inferior standing of your family and the poor behavior of your mother and your sisters and your father, I've decided to put all that aside and ask you to marry me. And as you can probably imagine, this doesn't go over very well with Miss Bennet. And it struck me, thinking about this was actually not a bad metaphor for our journey through voice at Microsoft. If you look at Mr. Darcy in the beginning of the film, he's very sort of stiff-necked, he's condescending, he speaks in a very imperious manner, and no one likes him. But we know, as the story progresses, that he's actually a really good guy with good intentions. He just has to unlearn a lot of that behavior and become more approachable, so that by the end of the movie, he looks more like this. So I call this stiff-necked Mr. Darcy, and this is wet t-shirt Mr. Darcy. So I think a lot of our journey at Microsoft has been about becoming wet t-shirt Microsoft. This is a slide. Don't worry, nothing happened. Imagine, how many of you have seen this screen before? Wow, I'm sorry. I just want to apologize on behalf of Microsoft and Bill Gates and everybody. We're sorry for whatever it is that you lost. This, of course, is known as the blue screen of death. And it's probably, I think I can say this with some impunity, the most hated screen in the history of software. Anybody want to argue with me on that? Okay. And how many of you actually read the text on the screen? Okay, well, we got a few. Okay, good. Well, you can see it's got some language here that's basically like a wall of text that no one reads because they're still in grief about whatever it is they lost. It has wonderful phrases like the end user manually generated the crash dump, whatever that means. And this is what happened in the old versions of Windows. Well, this is what it looks like today. It's a much cleaner, much different experience. And regardless of whatever you think of the frowny face emoticon, which, to be frank, a lot of tech bloggers, including that one, made a lot of fun of us for. I think it caused giggling all over the world. It represents a complete cultural shift at Microsoft. So to get from that first blue screen of death to this one represents a huge cultural shift and involving literally thousands of people. And that's really the story that I've come here today to tell you about, our journey through this, because it involved a lot of cultural shift, a lot of mindset. And we think of it as sort of losing our hubris and becoming closer to what the customers really care about. So why are we doing this? Well, first of all, if you look at what our competition is doing, they are already there, or many of them are. This is Google. Whoa, Google Chrome has crashed. Here's an American golf site. This is a 404 page. We're obviously looking for a ball. Here's a UK site. Stay calm, we've lost a lad. I've never even heard of this site, but apparently this is very popular here. Done some research and found this one. They have an interesting 404 as well. So much of our competitors are out there already. And if you look at social networking, which is the theme of this conference, so much of technical information is being transmitted in this way, and it's really bringing down the level of formality that we see across the board. And it's forcing us to really respond. But just because everyone else is doing it doesn't necessarily constitute a good reason for us to do it. Here's one of the real motivations for us. Our customers have been begging us for years to come up with a more approachable way to language. These are excerpts from comments filed to Excel. And if you do a search for the words plain English through the Excel content, it comes up over and over and over again. And the comments are not pretty. I'm totally convinced that the people who write the copy for their ads and manuals are sadists. Are you kidding? Think about the average person who really doesn't come into contact with this garbage. This one really kills me. I'm a business analyst on an IT team, and I'm offended by how unfriendly your help is. Offended. So, when we looked through these comments, we really felt like we had to respond. So here's some examples of what is in the UI for Office today. So this is a tooltip for the Office suite. For zooming or zooming, use the controls in the status bar. Here's another one. This is for spell check. Typos, not on our watch. Let us check your spelling. Check your audio. Others might be hearing an echo, echo, echo. These are the kinds of things you never would have seen in a Microsoft product 3 or 4 years ago. But we're putting more and more of this type of stuff in. Here's a screen that's the setup screen for Xbox. It's just simple and direct. You're ready to go. Here's another one for Xbox. With Xbox, there was a particular issue where people didn't understand that this button here was actually a button. It's a button, you press it, and you go to your home screen. They didn't know that, so we have this simple direction. Go to your home. It's the one in the middle. Windows Phone has really been on the forefront of this. I don't want to give you the impression that I'm the only person doing this. It started before me, and it involves a lot of people. We have very simple text like this. And then we have our new digital assistant with the new versions of Windows Phone called Cortana. And she's actually quite funny. She's kind of quippy, and she actually has interactions with, she tells jokes. So it's a new frontier that we're pushing through, and there's actually some really personal interaction. I also don't want to give you the impression that the voice principles that we use are just about being flip or attempting to be funny. It's really about being more direct and transparent. These are some of the principles that we use. The ones on the left are our Microsoft design principles. The visual principles that you see resulting in the tile-based interface that you see all over Microsoft products now. The voice matches up with those principles, and they're really about being straightforward, being direct, being honest when things have gone wrong, cutting out clutter. That's a big one. We had a lot of clutter in both our UI and both our documentation, things that really didn't need to be there. Staying on target. You know, we do these things where we go off in a bunch of different directions, building up these topics to huge links because someone asked for this, or someone thought, well, maybe you might have this, or something else along those lines. By the time you ended up with that topic, it was huge. And the point of it was lost. So staying on target is really important for us. I'll show you an example of or a few examples of before and afters. So here is gosh, I love this. Here is an example from Microsoft Excel. Now, most of you probably can't read it in the audience because it's too large. It's too long. It just hurts me to look at this because it's so dense and difficult. And ironically, this is one of the most common errors that you find in Excel. This message actually pops up for users all over the world millions of times a month. It's about a circular reference. It says, careful, we found one or more circular references in your workbook that might cause your formulas to calculate incorrectly. FYI, a circular reference can be a formula that refers to its own cell value or refers to a cell dependent on its own cell value. Whatever that means. Here's the rewrite. A formula may not work because it includes its own cell. Try moving the formula to an unused cell. The first one was almost 3 times as long as the second one, and it didn't even include a resolution. There's no help for you there. The second one is the one that includes the resolution. It's much shorter, it's much tighter, and it includes a fix. So our intent is straight to the point. It's easier to understand. It includes the fix, and there's no blame. It's very, very important for our users to know that we're not blaming them for whatever went wrong. And a lot of our content, frankly, before was very sort of pejorative. Well, you did this, end user person. Everyday words. This is something that we use to try to understand what it is that the customers are looking for. Here's one. I love this one. This is for Xbox when something goes wrong with your credit card. Prepaid codes cannot be consumed or activated if the user has billing violations or their payment instrument is in decline. Your payment instrument is in decline? I just want to kind of like shrivel up and, you know, I eat well, I work out. What? Why are you talking to me about my declining payment instrument? It's horrible. Here's after. Accounts with billing or payment issues can't redeem codes. Codes will work after the problems are taken care of. It's just something that you need to go check with your credit card. We don't need to bother you with violations and declining payment instruments. It's clean, it gets to the point, it's less is more, and a really important thing for Xbox is to keep them playing. Nobody gets an Xbox so they can be bothered about their payment instruments. They want to go back to playing Halo. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about intent. Because our approach to voice is not just about word choice, or it's not just about finding the right tone. It's really about understanding what it is the customers are looking for. So there's a little bit of science that goes with the art. And there are a couple ways that we do that, and I'll get into the second way in a second. But the first way is that we try very hard to understand what the customer's intents are. And we do that by analyzing their search data. So we collect all the searches that happen on Office.com and Windows.com, And we run them through some pretty intense data analysis to figure out when someone is searching for any given term, what they really mean. What are the most common terms? And what's the tail that allows us to interpret what they're searching for with those terms? And the results of that, this is part of the humility part, were really very surprising. Things that we just sort of took for granted were not what the customers were taking for granted. For example, just to give you a quick example, when users are searching for the word bold in Excel, we were assuming that they would want to bold some of their data, right? The text that's within any given cell. But that's not true. In fact, what they were searching for was how to bold the borders of the cell and make those darker. It never would have occurred to us because that is a border to us, who are making Excel. So that's a small example, but there are examples of that all over the documentation and the search queries for Office. So we did a lot of deep dive analysis to figure out what the user's true intent was and use it to structure our content model and also to be able to tune our content so that we really drill in very quickly on the things that people care about and get rid of all the things that they don't. Because previously what we do is we create, again, these monster topics that had 17 different ways to do any given thing because we didn't want to assume that we knew which way a given user wanted to do something. Finding out what their intent allowed us to cut all those other methods out and drill in precisely on the 80% case, the ones that we knew users wanted to pursue the most. We also did a lot of research. So research meant usability studies and also surveys, mass surveys for our customers. And one of our initial experiments was to set up a topic in 3 different ways. So this is a topic on autosave and auto-recover. These are features in Office that allow you to save your documents automatically for any given amount of time that you set. And this is the original topic, and I'll just read a little bit of it. And the screens I'm showing you are excerpts, so there's much more of these topics than you see here today. The auto-recover feature is not a substitute for manually saving your work by clicking Save. Regularly saving the file is the surest way to preserve the work that you have done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you see, with this topic, you're most likely here because you've already lost something. So you're already in a state of grief by the time that you get here. And what greets you when you're in your grieving state but this admonition to save your work, manually save your work? Well, I know, thank you. I didn't do that, that's why I'm here. So, and this goes on for quite a while, just sort of berating your customer for not saving their work. So we did a rewrite. This is what we call the empathetic version. Crashes happen, the power goes out, and sometimes people accidentally close the file without saving. To avoid losing all your work when stuff like that happens, make sure auto-recover and auto-save are turned on. And then it goes right into the procedure. In the previous version, you didn't get to a procedure until about 3 screens in. In this particular case, your procedure is right there at the top. And this topic, when it was done, was about 30% the length of the previous one. So that was the empathetic version. We also created an overboard version because we wanted to see how far people's tolerance for tone would be. So this one reads, your files are in mortal danger. Call upon the unsung heroes of Office, Auto and Recover, to save your work before disaster strikes. And I gotta be honest, we were secretly hoping that nobody preferred this version because then we'd have to publish it because it was so far out there, according to our expectations. So the way we constructed this experiment is we had 2,000, 2,100 survey respondents. They saw 2 out of these 3. What they saw was randomized, so they only saw 2 at a time, and we don't know which 2 or in what order they saw them. And we asked them to rate them on various qualities like professionalism, depth of information, ease of understanding. We didn't ask them to say which one they liked better. We wanted to see what qualities emerged from the different versions of these topics. And these are the results. Now, I've had to scrub out the numbers, but the way this chart is constructed is across the top you see the various audience types: IT pros, developers, business decision makers, information workers, and home users. And the formal is on the left, the empathetic version is on the middle, and the overboard is on the right. Green is good, yellow is okay, red is I didn't like this one as much. So you can see across the board, audiences of every single type overwhelmingly preferred the empathetic version. Even the developers, they all preferred it. And what you don't see here is that the margins were incredible. There were something like 18, 20, even 25% differences. Normally in an experiment like this, you hope for something like a 3 to 5% difference, and you call that statistically good. But in this case, we were getting just undeniable results. It was quite astonishing. Because a lot of the pushback that we encountered was from the more technical sides of the house, developers and IT pros, documentation writers, who were saying, well, that's fine for consumer, but it's not going to work for IT pro and developers. Well, you know what? It does. They want the same sort of simple approach as the consumers do. And the way I respond to it is like, well, nobody likes to waste time. They want to get back to what they need to do. And we've gone on to do further testing, more experiments like this, exclusively focusing on developer documentation and on IT pro documentation. And the results have been very similar across the board. So those are some of the early results. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how we made these things happen. Because it's one thing to come up with the intellectual property that's the basis of any sort of change movement, but it's an entirely different thing to make it happen. So we underwent a very deliberate program of change management. Because Microsoft is a giant place. There's something like 1,500 PMs, 2,000 PMs who work on Office alone. And we really need to be very deliberate about how we stage the campaign to make this change happen. This is a sigmoid curve. And what it illustrates is where people are along the change management process. So the champions are the people who are at the front. They're the people who are with you right from the get-go. They're just saying, yes, I love this idea, let's go. Execs, sometimes they can be, executives can be in big favor of your change. Sometimes they can be a little reluctant. You just have to plot them wherever they are in a given moment. Amenables are the folks who say, well, this sounds interesting, but let me hear more. They're not opposed to you. And then there are the boat anchors, the people who are digging in their heels and saying, no way, I am completely not in favor of this change. Well, our method here was to focus on the champions. Develop them, cultivate them, make them feel part of a team, and to let them do the work of pulling everybody else along the chain. I think previously, before we adopted this methodology, I would have spent all my attention here by looking at the naysayers and saying, you know what, I really need you to be a champion. But in this case, we pretty much ignored those people and let the champions pull everybody along. And it really, really worked. I mean, there were a couple of key things that we did. I gathered a small group of people together to help me develop these examples and to roll out ideas. We rewarded them, just sent out a lot of emails and congratulations for small wins along the way. We gave them things to identify themselves as part of the movement, and I'll show you a couple of those things in a second. But following this methodology was really key in making sure we could roll this voice effort across Microsoft. It's now going through pretty much every division at Microsoft, and we have champions in every single division around the world. But it's taken a long and deliberate process to get us there. This methodology that I'm talking about is not something that was invented by us or me. It's really in this book, Leading Change by John Cotter. Here's the Amazon UK site. So it's available in this country, but it's really a fantastic book. I do recommend picking up a copy if you can. There's a very short checklist at the beginning of the book that contains all the things that you really need to do. And we followed those things to pretty much to the letter. This is our robot at the beginning of the slide. And this is actually a poster that I had printed. It was very inexpensive. John Cotter actually recommends T-shirts. But I thought, not everybody's going to wear a T-shirt, and they get dirty. They don't wear them at the same time, stuff like that. But it's really, the intent is for your people, the people who are your advocates, to align themselves with your movement. And this robot, I was just looking for a cute image. But this robot sort of became a mascot. It became an icon that represented the entire movement. So this poster, people posted it up all over their offices, all over the buildings, the same halls where the president of office was. And it became this quick, identifiable symbol for the movement. So I think that's really important if you're driving a change management strategy, to have a quick visual or slogan that people can latch onto and identify with. I got to be honest, a few people hated the robot. They thought it stood for all things evil in the universe. But that's okay. That's fine. At least they were talking about it. At least it became this thing that they could identify with. Xbox had a similar poster, clean, casual, keep them playing. Again, just that reminder that, we don't want to keep people in the help documentation. We want to keep them playing their game. Partnerships were really quite key. There was a lot of urban mythology about why we were doing the things that we were doing. For example, most people who were opposed to the idea initially said, well, we can't do that because the localization team won't like it, the translators for global languages. And I said, okay, who are they? Let's go talk to them. So I went and talked to them, and they ran some tests on some of the new content. Well, it turns out, because most of our articles, our documents, were about 30% the length of the previous one, that these were actually a lot more economical to translate. Because translation, word count is money. Plus, their translators had a much easier time understanding the terminology they were using, and they were much easier to translate into different languages. So the localization people came back to me and said, when can we start? Let's go. It was the same thing for brand. There was a lot of urban mythology about the things that we had to do for brand. Like every article had to say, Microsoft Office Excel 2013. When you're working in Microsoft Excel Office 2013, don't forget to use Microsoft Office 20, the whole thing, over and over and over again. So I went back to brand and I said, do we really have to say Microsoft Office Excel 2013 every single time? And they said, no, where did you get that? That's stupid. And I had to have them write this to me in an email because nobody would believe me that they really did not require this. But again, it was an example of building partners. And those folks that I reached out to became some of our biggest champions because they were really pushing for this change. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some things that I find inspiring, because I think it's important to have benchmarks of things that you're looking for. And one of them is the thing that is I think probably one of the greatest examples of technical communication ever created, because it was created in 1968, and it's still in use today. And you probably saw it coming here to Brighton at some point. It's this one, Mind the Gap. Now the story is, if you haven't heard it, is that when these new train stations were introduced in 1968, some of them had curved platforms. And of course the trains were straight. So you need to come up with a simple yet gentle reminder not to kill yourself while you're walking into the train. Again, this could be an example of content making up for bad engineering, but that resonates with a few of you, doesn't it? I can hear that. Okay. But I think some of the part of the reason why this works is, it's very much associated with a certain voice. There's a very select fraternity of people who have voiced this message over the years. It works because it's easy and simple to paint on a train platform. And it's become a cultural icon. It's on pillows and T-shirts, and it's been the source of books and movies and all sorts of things. It's become much more than a piece of technical communication. It's become part of the global worldwide culture. It's used in train stations all over the world. And it's so simple and so direct. It's just a few words. Mind the gap. And it's kind of things like this that drive my passion, to find things that really, really resonate with users, things that are simple and encouraging. I think, I'm going to tell you a story. When I first started working, my first job was sort of an unusual one. I was an intern at the military newspaper for the United States government. And it's called Pacific Stars and Stripes, and it was based in Tokyo. It's this small little barracks, little military outpost in the middle of downtown Tokyo. It's my first job, and I got there, after about a week. And a few days after I got there, I got this memo in my mailbox. And it was really dense. It was about 4 or 5 pages, single-spaced. I'm looking through it, and I cannot understand what it says. The language is so dense in there that it just completely goes beyond me. And I'm starting to panic because I can't figure out what it means. I'm looking over, and I look at this for about an hour. I'm breaking out into a cold sweat. It could be anything from, you know what, this isn't working out, we're sending you home, to the United States is declaring war on Japan, or something. You know, it was just, I had no idea. So I took it to the master sergeant. This is the guy basically who runs the base. And he takes the paper from me, he looks at it for about 5 seconds, hands it back to me and says, "Kid, this is your locker combination." Like, oh, thank you very much. And when you think about it, there are 3 potential characters in this story. There's me, the kid who knows nothing. There is the master sergeant who can cut through, 3,000 words of nonsense to deliver the clarity that you need in 5 seconds. And then there's the poor slob somewhere deep in the bowels of the United States Pentagon who spent the better part of a week writing 3,000 words when really all I needed were those 3 numbers that helped me open my locker. And if you think about it, because of what it is that we do, we have the opportunity to be each one of those characters pretty much every single day or every single week. And, I'm constantly reminded of that person I was when I didn't know how to read a memo. Like just the other day, I was in London, and I was trying to rent one of those bikes, at the bike stands. There's this sort of automatic kiosk where you go up. And I thought, okay, the information looks fairly straightforward. And, there was some numbered procedure on the kiosk, and I started, and I put in my credit card, and all of a sudden I'm hit with this blizzard of information. Like, okay, you have an hour and a half to use your bike, but actually you have a 24-hour period, but if you only have an hour and a half, then you need to come back and return your bike, otherwise we start charging you extra. And I just thought, okay, well, I'm just putting in my card, I'm taking the card out, and somehow it works. And then it spits out this information, this piece of instruction, and which is really hard to read. And at the bottom of it, it says, "This release code is only valid for 10 minutes." I'm like, great, I'm being timed. This is a test. It's a timed test. So I get over, there's 3 bikes, and 2 of them are broken. And I get over to the one bike that I think, okay, this is my only chance. And it says, the number keypad is to the left of the handlebar. And to the left of the handlebar, there's nothing. It's just air. And, I finally find the keyboard, and it looks like there's some wild dog that has chewed it for a while. And there's no way for me to actually input the number. And the time is clicking down, and finally I get to about 9 minutes and 30 seconds, and I finally get my bike loose. And by that time, I'm too tired to ride the bike. It's like, I am a senior content manager at Microsoft. I can't rent a bike. I still don't know if I returned it correctly. I mean, for all I know, I could go back to the United States and have a $900 bill, and some kid in Brighton is riding around in my bike. So I always think about these moments where, you know, despite all our expertise, our position at the, you know, we're really at the top of the technical communication food chain. Think about these moments that were so humbling for me. And remember that when we go into any new technology or new information and try to provide the best way forward for our customers, I think about who I was when I didn't know anything, or who I was on Sunday when I tried to rent this bike. You saw my curve a few slides ago, where I put champions and boat anchors. Well, I didn't come here just to talk to you. I came here to ask you to join me on that curve, right at the top where the champions are. So when we leave here, let's go out of here together as champions and be strong advocates for our customers and for the change we need to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doug. That was really inspiring. I hope
you.
everybody enjoyed that talk. We've got about 2 minutes for one or two questions from the audience, if anybody would like to put Doug on the spot about something.
Okay.
About how to hire a bike, or how to open a locker.
If any of you can explain that to me, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
Mac.
Great.
Everything you shared was very exciting, very positive. I was just wondering, what is Microsoft doing to get out the message that they have done this? Because I think, there's a lot of legacy baggage around Microsoft, and probably a lot of people remember the blue screen and don't know that you've done this.
Yeah. So the question is, what are we doing to talk to people about how we're making this change? To be perfectly honest, it's a little controversial how we're doing this. So we haven't really landed on a plan for it. The controversy comes from the idea that we're sharing our intellectual property when we talk about it. I'm obviously here, and so I'm not in that camp. So I believe that we really do have to make statements to our customers that let them know that we really are trying in a new and different way to advocate for them. But yeah.
I'm currently just been employed by London Cycle Hire. I'm very interested because one of my jobs is going to be working out all the new structures.
Okay. Wow, that is awesome. I'm so happy. Can you explain this to me? That would be fantastic. Wow, I had no idea. Yeah. I have to admit, part of the problem was I didn't actually read everything on this. I was too panicked about the time going by.
Okay. Just one
Yeah.
more question, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious about the localization.
Thank you. I'm curious about the localization question because it's not simply a question of ease of translation, but also a question of culture. I live in France, and for example, some of the casual language, something like the Google one that you showed says, whoa, that just won't play in France.
Sure.
People will say, ce n'est pas sérieux. It's not serious.
Right. Right.
So I'm wondering if you've found a way to, because the French do value clear, direct communication. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if you found a way to translate not just the words, but the style in a way that's culturally appropriate as you do your localization.
Sure. So we have a couple of different ways to do that. One is that when we have something that's kind of out there and is really only going to resonate with the U.S. audience because of the phrasing, we'll provide an alternate within our tool set that allows the translators to say, okay, this is what this really means. Because we have gotten in trouble a few times when they've actually misinterpreted what the English intent was.
It's not just the Englishes either. It's also it's not just American English. British English might not.
Yeah, exactly. So the comment there is that British English, sometimes interprets things differently from American English, and that's certainly true. So we do try to provide notes for the translators, but we also try to empower them to make decisions that are appropriate to their country and their market. So we do a lot of things to try to give them the information and the leeway to be able to translate things correctly. Now, that obviously doesn't work for machine translation, but we don't try to put things that are really kind of out there into the machine translation pipe.
I think we've got to call a halt to the discussion. It's a fascinating discussion, and it could continue. And Doug is giving an extra workshop tomorrow morning if you want to continue. And Doug's going to be around for the whole conference if you want to speak to him. We have to end the session now because the hotel staff have to split this room back into two separate rooms for the rest of the day. So I'd like you to join me all in a round of applause to thank Doug for his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.